Hi everyone, welcome back to Feeding Raven Doodles, a pet parent's guide to nutrition. Today's topic is recalls. Now, pet food recalls can be super scary for us as pet owners. They can make us worry if our pet's food has been affected, wonder what we should do when we hear about a pet food recall, and it can even make us question if commercial pet foods are safe for our pets. It's extremely important for all pet parents to understand what pet food recalls are, why they happen, and what to do if your pet's food has been affected by a recall. We're going to be talking about all of this and much more in today's episode. Probably the most historic pet food recall of all time happened in 2007. It involved over 150 pet food companies that sourced plant protein ingredients from two manufacturers in China. Unfortunately, these plant protein mixtures were adulterated with a chemical called melamine, which is not an approved food additive. Melamine caused kidney failure, severe illness, and even death in thousands of pets in the United States. Now, the melamine pet food recalls of 2007 were a true tragedy. Many pets' lives were lost. Many pet food companies went bankrupt because of this. Those two Chinese manufacturers did shut down. And while this was a serious tragedy, it did lead to many of the pet food safety regulations that we have today. Recalls that are regulated by the FDA include drugs, human foods, and pet foods. Pet food or pet treat recalls happen when an issue is identified with the product, and then that product is taken off the market. These issues can be anything from a safety concern to a simple labeling problem. And per the FDA, when an FDA-regulated product is either defective or potentially harmful, recalling that product is the most effective means for protecting the public. A Class 1 recall involves dangerous or defective products that predictably could cause serious health problems or death. One example of a Class 1 recall is pet foods that are contaminated with Salmonella, Listeria, or Clostridium botulinum bacterial species. These bacteria pose severe public health risks. Another example of a Class 1 recall would be pet foods that mistakenly contain toxic levels of nutrients, and these toxic levels would cause harm or death in the pets that are consuming them. A good example of the toxic level of nutrients would be vitamin D, which can cause severe health issues in our pets. A third example of a Class 1 recall would include pet foods that contain other toxins present in the food, such as aflatoxins, which are produced by mold species. A Class 2 recall involves products that might cause a temporary health problem or pose only a slight threat of a serious nature. An example of a Class 2 recall would include pet foods with formulation errors that are non-life-threatening, pet foods that are contaminated with bacterial species that are not on the FDA's zero tolerance list, like the three that I mentioned in the Class 1 section, or pet foods that contain foreign objects like plastic or rubber pieces. A Class 3 recall involves products that are unlikely to cause any adverse health reaction, but that violate FDA labeling or manufacturing laws. Examples of a Class 3 pet food recall would include foods that have defective packaging or foods that have labels that are missing necessary elements. In the first scenario, the company discovers a problem with a product and contacts the FDA. Now, pet food companies with great quality control will find issues with their products before they even get on the market. And therefore, a true recall would never happen because that pet food hasn't left the facility yet. More often, though, pet food companies with decent quality control will find issues with their products shortly after they've hit the shelves. So, very few, if any, pets get affected by the recall. In these situations, pet food companies will recall very few specific batches of foods because they know when and where the problem happened. This scenario is called a voluntary recall because the pet food company is going to agree to issue the recall, and they're actually the ones that bring the issue to the FDA's attention in the first place. In the second scenario, the FDA inspects a manufacturing facility and determines the potential for a recall. In this scenario, the FDA is going to let the pet food company know that a product is potentially unsafe or mislabeled based on an inspection. So the FDA is going to suggest that the company either fixes the problem or recalls the product. And the company can do one of two things. The best thing, would be fixing the problem or issuing the recall. This is obviously the ideal outcome. This is also a voluntary recall because, again, the pet food company is agreeing to the recall and they are helping the FDA out with this. The pet food company in this situation should also take steps to fix their quality control so that the issue doesn't happen again. Now, the second thing that a pet food company can do is ignore the FDA when they offer a voluntary recall. So this is technically legal for the pet food company to do. They don't have to recall the product just because the FDA suggests it. But it does open the pet food company up to more problems. They have the potential for an involuntary or forced recall if the product hits the market and causes illness or death in pets or people. They open themselves up to the potential for bad press and lawsuits because they knew that the product was unsafe, yet they still marketed it anyway. So the best thing for a pet food company to do in this scenario is to just recall the product or just fix the problem when the FDA lets them know that their product has a problem. In the third scenario, the FDA receives reports of pet or human illness caused by the product. The FDA has access to various reporting systems where pet owners, veterinarians, physicians, and pet food companies can report on health problems that are caused by pet foods. But when pets and people get sick from pet foods, this is often an issue of very poor quality control on the part of the pet food manufacturer. So the FDA is going to issue an involuntary or forced recall, where the products are removed from the market by the FDA itself without any input from that pet food company. Good pet food companies are going to recall defective products quickly and willingly. They're going to work with the FDA and be open and transparent with all their consumers. They're also going to advise pet owners on what to do next, and they may even issue reimbursement for defective or harmful products, or even veterinary bills. Good pet food companies are also going to perform good quality control, internal testing, and do their own investigations to trace issues back to their source. On the other hand, really bad pet food companies are going to ignore the FDA when they ask for a voluntary recall. They might deny the issue exists, or they might blame others for the issue. Often, these pet food companies don't own their own manufacturing facilities, and they don't do routine testing and have very poor quality control. Bad pet food companies might have multiple warning letters from the FDA, and the really sketchy ones are going to fight the FDA on their procedures and their safety policies. These are pet food companies that you're definitely going to want to avoid if they disagree with all the safety regulations that the FDA has in place to keep our pets safe. A recall is over when a pet food company completes their corrective actions. These actions are deemed satisfactory by the FDA, and then the FDA ensures that all the product is taken off the market and destroyed. After this, the FDA is going to begin an investigation as to why the recall happened. Only then will a pet food recall be considered over. The best way to stay up to date with recalls is by signing up for the FDA's email notification list. But keep in mind that this does include drug recalls, human food recalls, and pet food and treat recalls. Another way to stay up to date with pet food recalls specifically is to bookmark the FDA's pet food recall page and check it regularly. Another great way to stay up to date with what's going on with a pet food company is to follow them on social media. Many pet food companies share what's going on within their company, and they might share information on recalls on their social media platforms. The first thing you're going to want to do if you suspect that your pet food has been affected by a recall is confirm that the pet's food is affected. You're going to need to check the FDA's website for all the information on the recall, such as the brand, the diet name, and the batch or the lot number. Then you're going to compare that information to your pet's food label. This is one of the many reasons that you're going to want to store your pet's food in the original packaging. And for more information on that, check out food storage. Then, once you confirm that your pet's food has indeed been affected by the recall, stop feeding that diet. You're also going to want to save some of the food just in case testing needs to be done on it later. So for kibble, store it in a sealed plastic baggie in the freezer, and for canned food, just keep one sealed can from the batch. You're also going to need to take a picture of the label or save the packaging so that you can confirm that it actually is the food that has been affected by the recall. Then you're going to need to return it for a refund. Oftentimes you can bring the food back to the place of purchase to get a full refund, and then the pet store will dispose of it for you. If you bought the pet food online, contact that pet food distributor for their policies on returning recalled products. If they don't pay for the return shipping, you'll just have to dispose of it yourself. If you need more information on pet food recall, you can definitely check out the FDA's website, and they usually provide the pet food company contact information on their recall page. You can also, of course, check the product packaging or website for the manufacturer's information. If you suspect that there's an issue with your pet's food, you're definitely going to want to first keep the original package and ensure that you have all that relevant information like the brand name, the diet name, and the batch or lot number. You're going to need to find the manufacturer's info either on the bag or online, and if possible, find that receipt from when you purchased the food. Then you're going to need to note any issues that you have come across when you're feeding the food. Does the food smell bad? Does it look rancid? Are there bugs or mold in it? Are there pieces of foreign material like plastic or rubber inside that bag? And take pictures to document these things. Did the food make your pet sick? If you do notice any signs of illness in your pet, definitely take them to the veterinarian right away. Let the veterinarian know what they ate and when they ate it, and keep the invoices of the cost of services at the veterinarian. Did the pet food make people in your home sick? Definitely encourage these people to go to the doctor. Help the doctor out by letting them know what the person handled, when they handled the food, and what all the issues were. Definitely document the problem just like you would with your pet going to the veterinarian. Then you're going to need to report the complaint to the FDA. They do have a page for reporting pet food complaints, and you're going to need to make sure that you read the directions carefully because they do need a lot of information on the diet and the issue, and it can be very time-consuming to report a pet food complaint to the FDA. Last but not least, you're going to want to contact the pet food company. While the FDA is the regulatory body to which you should report all problems, a good pet food company might even be able to act quicker than the FDA can. A good pet food company will be able to advise you on what to do next, get you a refund, or get you a new bag of pet food. Finding a pet food company that's never had a recall before might sound like a great way to avoid this whole problem. But when you are evaluating a pet food company, there are so many more important things to consider than whether or not they've had a recall. And for more information, check out my video, How to Pick a Pet Food Part 1. So when you're evaluating the recall history of a pet food company, consider whether the company is large or small. So large pet food companies might have hundreds of thousands of customers, and the law of large numbers says that they're more likely to have a pet food recall than smaller companies. When large pet food companies have a few recalls, it's a small percentage of all the diets that they produce. But when a small pet food company has a few recalls, it's a larger percentage of all of their diets. So this is one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to consider is how old is that pet food company? A newer pet food company is less likely to have recalls because they're in what's considered a grace period with the FDA and AAFCO. An older pet food company that's been around for decades might be more likely to have a recall just because they've produced so many more diets for so much longer than these newer pet food companies. Another thing to keep in mind is whether or not the pet food company has good quality control. The only way to find this out is if you call them and ask them, or if you visit their facilities. You're going to want to find out, how do they ensure that there's no contamination with their diets? Do they do final visual checks and perform chemical analyses of their foods? And do they perform feeding trials? The last thing to keep in mind is, what kind of recalls has the pet food company had? Some pet food companies advertise that they've never had a recall, but they actually mean they've never had an involuntary or an FDA-enforced recall. So find out what kind of recalls the pet food companies had, what class the recalls were, why they happened, how the pet food company handled the recall, and what the outcome was. Now, some pet parents believe that the best way to avoid harmful products is to simply feed a homemade diet. And the idea behind this is that you, as the chef, control the ingredients. But did you know that human foods are recalled much more often than pet foods are? And despite some issues with commercial products, they are often safer and healthier for our pets. Commercial pet foods are complete and balanced, they're more practical, and they're less expensive than homemade diets. Commercial pet foods have to follow AAFCO guidelines, FDA and state government regulations, and laws. Now, there are some pet food companies that are better than others. These better pet food companies are more science-based, they employ experts, and they have good quality control. And once again, for tips on how to pick a good pet food company, you can check out my video that I mentioned previously, How to Pick a Pet Food Part 1. Now, if you are seriously considering feeding a homemade diet, definitely check out my video, Homemade Diets. Homemade diets can be seriously dangerous to your pet's health if they are not formulated or prepared properly. And homemade diets should only be fed with the help of a board-certified veterinary nutritionist, which is an expert that is qualified to formulate diets for both healthy and sick pets. Thank you so much for watching this Popular Topics video on pet food recalls. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Check out that video's description below, where I give you a bunch of resources for pet food recalls, including all of the FDA's pages on pet food recalls and recalls in general. Don't forget to check out feedingravendoodles.com, where I give you all of my articles, videos, and resources all in one place. Next time, we're going to be talking about quick tips, food gorging, so pets that eat too darn fast. Like her. Say bye, Raven.